How do you organize your life? Do you look at it like a calendar and go day by day, week by week, month by month? Maybe you use an app for that and you use a digital device to organize your life. Maybe you're like a lot of my friends where you end up just using your own intuition and you let life organize itself. For me, though, I love little pieces of paper. Not confetti. I want to make sure that was clear. But little pieces of paper that you write on, like these. I love napkins. I absolutely love being in the kitchen, cooking. I love having drinks with friends. I love eating. And napkins are always available when I have that amazing moment. They're non-judgmental. They're available. They're always open to that great idea. As you can tell, I love index cards. It drives my wife nuts. I have them all over the place in our home. Some of them have new app ideas. Some of them have new book ideas. Maybe there's a revolution in there somewhere. In fact, I'm pretty agnostic when it comes to pieces of paper. I was once on a red eye coming from LA to New York. An idea struck me. Took the back of my airline ticket and wrote my first book proposal. Did okay, ended up being my first major book. I'm actually not the only person to be inspired by little pieces of paper. Several decades ago, there was a guy named Paul Lauterbur, and he was actually at Elias Big Boy in Pittsburgh, out of all places. He was having a hamburger, and he got inspired. He took his greasy napkin, after taking another bite, took his greasy napkin and drew a sketch. That sketch ended up being the basis for the first MRI machine. He won a Nobel Prize based on that, just in this little greasy napkin. Another guy, David Bowie, in the late 60s, he was on a tour bus going who knows where. Ended up getting inspired. Legend has it he took a napkin and did the whole universe for his alter ego, Ziggy Stardust. Changed the face of rock and roll. So as I was researching this, and as you guys are probably asking, what is it about napkins? What is it about getting our ideas napkin ready, as I call it, that inspires us? Why can't we do the same thing with an app or with a PowerPoint? I thought about it, and I came up with a few ideas. The first one is that they inspire spontaneous expression. There's a cliche. I came up with the idea in the shower. There's a reason why that's a cliche, right? It's when we're taking a shower, or we're having dinner with a friend, or we're out enjoying our life, or that twilight, which always hits me right before we're about to wake up in the morning. And napkins are always available for that, so are index cards and other scrap pieces of paper. Now, what's nice about it is that anecdotally, we've known this for years. But there's actually some scientific proof now. Some scientists argue that our unconscious continues to work on things even when we're not thinking about them. So they're actually unlocking that puzzle. In fact, there's even newer studies that say that if we think about something too much, it actually gets in the way of the unconscious actually working it out for us. So in a sense, we're getting in our own way. The best way to do that is to think about something and then enjoy our lives. Napkins are ready for that. So number one, spontaneous expression. Number two, and I like this one, silencing the inner critic. Now, my first major mentor, Wilma Garcia, rest in peace, when she taught me about writing, she said all of us, not just writers, but all of us have one of two different critics in our brain. We have the sumo mind, and we have the monkey mind, which I can't really do with the mic. You can imagine the sumo mind thinks very, very slowly, beautifully, but slowly. I have an idea. Okay, let me sit on it. Okay, I think I'll write it down. Okay, I wrote it down. It needs to be revised. I'm not sure. We'll see. Let's see how it goes from here. I'll deal with it tomorrow. Now, as it has been mentioned in other talks, it's kind of like looking at Michelangelo's David, but it being half complete. It's like looking at a statue coming out of the marble. You see the beauty there, but it's not finished. You don't know what it is, and it's unusable. The worst case scenario, if you have a sumo mind, is that you become the ultimate procrastinator. There's always another day to think about it, and those ideas are never shared, which doesn't help anybody. And of course, we have the monkey mind, which is actually from Zen philosophy. And it grabs this and that, and it's super creative, and there's always a new idea, and let me write this idea down. I have another idea. Scratch those out, start over again. It's always flowing, very childlike, very beautiful too. Problem with that is that they don't do that meditation that sumo minds do too much of. So if you have a monkey mind, you might have a brilliant idea, and worst case scenario, another so-called brilliant idea comes by and knocks that original idea out, and it's lost into the ether. And that original idea might have been the one that would have solved your puzzle. What's nice about these little pieces of paper is that it chills everyone out. Suddenly, it's like, hey, I'm a napkin. I can't harm you. It's not a big book. It's not a big presentation. You can just write out whatever you feel here. You don't need to judge it. You don't need to be critical of it. It's okay. Now, what's nice is that when you relax the inner critic, the outer critics tend to relax too. Imagine taking a wrinkled up index card or a greasy napkin and handing it to your colleagues and saying, you know what? I have this idea. I'm going to take people and throw them to this huge metal bullet and look at their insides. They're going to be like, that sounds insane. And when I thought about this thing that Dr. Lauterborough must have went through when he thought about the MRI machine, I was like, no, that's not how you do it. You give them this 600, 700-page book, this thesis, and you go over every single detail. I thought about it more. I talked to some colleagues. I thought about my own anecdotal experiences, and I realized that, no, I was wrong again. The little piece of paper was the way to go. First of all, I've written quite a few books, and I have relatives that love me dearly who have never read my books. So imagine colleagues. People don't always get a chance to read through your stuff. So that becomes an intimidating process, way too much pressure. Number two, if you give someone a 700-page thesis or book or 200 pages of schematics, they're going to assume, just in their unconscious perhaps, that you went over every single detail. But you're one person. And this is a new idea, there's going to be flaws with it. Instead, give them a greasy napkin. Give them a wrinkly index card. They're going to look at it and say, well, this sounds like a crazy idea on a crazy wrinkly piece of paper. But if you turn it this way, and there's some potential here, if you make the line here, and you might have something here. And what you have is a conversation, which is what you really want to start. You don't want things to be complete. You want to collaborate. You want to connect. You want people to understand your idea. These are perfect vehicles for that. I encourage you to try it on your own. So, number one, the ability to have that spontaneous expression. Number two, the ability to silence that inner critic. And number three, which is probably my favorite, the ability to edit. Now, I have to be really clear about this. When I talk about editing, I'm not talking about criticism. Criticism implies judgment. This is good, this is bad. Editing talks about space. You don't have the space to mess around. You need to get to your core idea, which, as many writers also know, it's easier to do a 4,000-word story than it is to do a 400-word story, right? You need to be able to edit and get to the core of that idea. You can't mess around with a 3x5 index card or with a wrinkled cocktail napkin. You need to get the essence of your idea. Let me show you some examples. How many of you guys are familiar with this? Yeah? Cool. It's not the food pyramid, which I initially thought because I always think of food. No, this is actually Maslow's hierarchy of needs, as some of you already know. Now, what's amazing about this is how little context you need. For you guys that aren't familiar, these are 5 layers. The bottom one is physiological. So we need shelter, we need food, some of the things that were addressed at the conference today. Once we get beyond that, though, those basic necessities to survive, we go up to the next level until we get to 5, and ideally, that'll be self-actualization. Now, simple concept changed psychology and sociology several decades ago when it was made. Talk about serious branding. This is what Maslow will always be known for. This is something I drew on a cocktail napkin. Talk about amazing branding. It's something that Mad Men's Don Draper would have been jealous for. This is his legacy. That is amazing. I drew it 5 seconds, as you can tell by the wrinkled lines, 5 seconds on a napkin. Brilliant stuff. Another one, which has also come up during the conference, this one, E equals mc squared, Einstein's theory of relativity. Now, he came up with a ton of theories, and from the reading I did about him, he worked on this one theory for decades. He was an older guy, but he wasn't that old. Decades is a long time. And it comes to this. It seems really appropriate to quote him, where he said, "If you cannot say something simply, then you do not truly understand it," unquote. He actually walked the walk when it came to this. 5 characters, 3 letters. Now, when I first thought about this, I was like, I had a sense of deja vu. Like we had this conversation before. And I was thinking, what else inspires spontaneous creativity? Inspires you to quiet your inner critic, and finally inspires you to edit. And I realized that I was thinking about modern social media. When you send a Snapchat to a friend, a quick picture or video, when you have a Facebook post off the top of your head and you write it right away to share with your friends, if you're on Twitter, 140 characters, think about that for a second. 140 characters or less, and you're sharing your big idea with the billions of people out there, you're using the same tenets I'm talking about with these little pieces of paper. And I would argue maybe the reverse is true. If you're my age and you're passing notes in class in elementary or high school, or if you were a scientist and you're sharing something on a greasy hamburger, those basic tenets are what we're using for social media today. So we could actually argue that napkins were the original social media. Now, I love this kind of stuff, but it also kind of scares me, and it scares a lot of communication folks like me. We've been trying to figure out exactly what's happening with communication. See, back in my day, around the time I was born, we actually wrote letters and sent 23-cent stamps. After that were faxes, which some of you guys might not even be familiar with. And then it was email, and then it was text, and then it was emoticons, which are the little smiley faces that are so popular nowadays. And then finally, we're just sending pictures, Instagrams and Snapchats. We're going back to caveman times all of a sudden. We're not even using words. How crazy is that? And as I was researching this, I actually started to get some comfort. Because I realized that these basic tenets that floated these amazing, brilliant ideas are what's also being used in modern social media, then I can take comfort that my son's generation, and the generation after that, and the generation after that, will be able to change the world with their tweets, with their Facebook messages, with their yos, with their texts, with all the millions of things that are happening now. On a more personal note, or more selfish note, it also gives me a lot of comfort that if these tenets are the things that are used to change the world, and they have been for ages, then these little pieces of paper will never go out of fashion. Thank you.